but they didn't. So when you control for these factors, you find they actually really underutilized the GI Bill. So then it's more of a puzzle. Why was that the case? Because on the face of it, the GI Bill, there were some small groups of women who were actually excluded, like women, the WASPs, the Women's Army Service Pilots, were not allowed to use it. But by and large, the vast majority of women who served were enabled to use it, but used it at lower rates. So I wondered why, and there were various factors. I think it was promoted less for women. One woman who I interviewed said to me, she said, "Oh, the GI Bill, they created that with the men in mind, didn't they?" And I think that's how many female veterans felt about it. But it was also the case that there was a delimitation date on when you could use the benefits. You had to use them within 10 years of the termination of your service in the military. And for most of these women, actually what they said to me was, they said, "Don't you know, we had babies, we came home, we got married, and we had children. We weren't using the GI Bill." But then, after that 10-year period, many of them went on and got more education or training, but it was after their GI Bill eligibility had expired. So they underutilized it, even though they're quite a highly educated group. And I think, speculatively, that this might help to explain why during that period of time, this generation of women participated less in public life than men of their generation. It's long been a puzzle to scholars why it is that women attained the vote in 1920, and when the vote was extended to women, there have been a lot of opponents who are very fearful, they're going to change politics. Well, for a long time, it seemed like nothing much was changing, and women weren't even participating all that much. Now it's the case that in voting, women participate more than men. There's still a gender gap in other kinds of political activities. But I speculate that the fact that women were having less of that experience of government mattering in their lives in a personal way than men were might explain why that gender gap persisted through that time period in political participation. And so what this says to me is that it illustrates why inclusive policies are so critically important for democracy, because of the ways that they can enhance citizenship. So the generation that served in World War II was a great generation already. By the time they came home from the war, they had defended the nation and the world against Nazism and fascism. The GI Bill further strengthened their capacity and their inclination to be involved in public life, and it prepared them for civic leadership. I believe that it deserves its reputation as landmark legislation of the 20th century, and one of the best things, I think, that American government has ever done. It did indeed expand access to the American dream, and what's more, it helped to make the United States a more inclusive and a more vibrant democracy, more closely approximating the ideal of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Thank you.
Suzanne Mettler, political science professor at Cornell University and the author of Soldiers to Citizens, the GI Bill and the Making of the Greatest Generation. Mettler spoke recently at the Minnesota History Center about her research on the impact of the GI Bill on World War II veterans.
Many veterans organizations worked for it, and it will go into effect this coming August. And it includes much more generous GI Bill education and training benefits than we've had in quite a while. There's been, so I didn't mention through my talk, there have been many subsequent GI Bills. There was the Korean War GI Bill, and then a GI Bill for Vietnam veterans, and some other packages in between, and then the Montgomery GI Bill has been in effect from the mid-1980s to the present. And over time, of course, the cost of college has gone up way faster than inflation, and the GI Bill has been, it's been really difficult to have a bill that's been as generous as the original GI Bill was. And also, more veterans now are likely to use it to go to college rather than vocational training, which is more expensive. So it's been falling behind in real terms, and in recent years, it's tremendously underutilized. It's no longer an outright gift. It is instead, it's contributory. You have to, when you first enter the military, actually some young veterans have told me that, on your first night at like 4 in the morning or something, you're asked to sign all sorts of paperwork, and you're asked, do you want to qualify for the GI Bill, which means that you have to have $1,200 taken out of your check during the first year. It's been a contributory program. So, and it's been, most people who've used it have only been able to afford to go to community colleges or some public four-year institutions on it, but it just doesn't go as far. So the new web bill is much more generous. And the way that it works, it's a more complicated bill than past versions. The rates will be set by every state. Veterans will qualify for tuition up to the level of tuition in the flagship public university in that state, regardless of what college in that state they go to. There's also a program that will give an incentive to private institutions with higher tuition to give additional financial aid to veterans with a matching grant from government, although I think implementing that right now in this economy is going to be challenging. There's been some concern about that recently.
Suzanne Mettler, who is a political science professor at Cornell University, speaking recently at the Minnesota History Center. She has researched the impact of the GI Bill on World War II veterans. Her book is titled Soldiers to Citizens, the GI Bill and the Making of the Greatest Generation. Well, that does it for our midday program today. Gary Eichen here. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to break for some headlines, and then Talk of the Nation comes on.
Call 800-989